Have you ever found yourself reaching for a word, but it just doesn't come? Or maybe you misplaced something again, and you're sure it was right there just a second ago? It's frustrating, isn't it? We've all experienced moments like these. And for most of us, they're just little lapses that happen now and then. But what if those lapses, over time, began to add up? What if some of those moments were signs of something more serious? Something like dementia? I know that term can sound scary, and many of us, especially as we get older, start to wonder, am I forgetting too much? Is my mind slipping? It's natural to feel concerned about these things, but here's the thing, dementia isn't just about forgetting. It's more complex than that, and not all signs are the obvious ones that you might have heard about. In fact, there are some very strange signs that most people don't even know to look for. In today's video, I want to talk about 10 of these signs. Things that might be happening in your life or in the life of someone you love, and you just don't realize they could be a clue to something else. But don't worry, these signs don't mean that you're destined to have dementia. In fact, many of them are things we can address, and they don't necessarily point to anything irreversible. Sometimes, small changes in our habits or daily routines can make a big difference. Don't forget to subscribe for more tips and advice that can help you live your healthiest, happiest life. Let's start with the first strange sign that I want to highlight today. Have you ever noticed that you become much more easily distracted? Maybe you're sitting down to read a book or you're trying to watch your favorite show, but your mind keeps drifting. You think about something else, and suddenly you realize you've been thinking about that other thing for 10 minutes. And when you try to get back to what you were doing, it's like starting from scratch all over again. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. It's so easy to dismiss these moments. We all have so many things on our minds. But this type of distraction, where it's hard to stay focused or complete simple tasks, can be a subtle sign that something deeper might be going on. It's especially noticeable if you're usually the type to focus easily and then, all of a sudden, tasks seem harder to complete. You find yourself forgetting parts of your conversation or having to read the same paragraph over and over because your mind keeps wandering. These distractions can be one of the earliest warning signs of dementia, though it's important to remember that it doesn't always mean something's wrong. Stress, lack of sleep, or even a change in routine can also play a role. But when this type of distraction happens more often and affects your ability to stay engaged with what you're doing, it's worth paying attention to. Now, let's move on to another sign that can sometimes be a little tricky to notice, especially since it happens slowly and gradually. Have you ever found yourself losing interest in activities that used to bring you joy? Maybe you used to love going for a walk or playing cards with friends, but now you just can't seem to get the energy to do those things anymore. Or you might be getting more withdrawn in social situations, not because you're feeling tired, but because things don't seem as enjoyable as they used to. You might think it's just because you're getting older, but sometimes these changes in interest can be a subtle warning sign of dementia. The brain is a powerful organ, and when it's working well, it helps us feel motivated and connected to the things we love. When dementia starts to affect the brain, it can dampen that sense of joy and enthusiasm. What once brought pleasure might now feel like a chore, or it might even seem irrelevant. But just like the distraction sign, it can be hard to pinpoint right away because it happens gradually. And if you're not careful, you might just chalk it up to getting older or having less energy. But if you notice yourself or someone you care about becoming more disengaged, more uninterested in activities that used to be fun, it's important to pay attention to that change. Now, let's talk about something that many of us might experience in the evening. Do you ever find that your sleep patterns are changing? Maybe you're waking up in the middle of the night and having a hard time getting back to sleep, or perhaps you're waking up earlier than usual, feeling restless. When you think about it, you might brush it off as a sign of aging. After all, sleep problems are common as we get older. But there's something important to consider here. Dementia can cause disruptions in the body's internal clock, which regulates sleep. If you notice that your sleep is becoming erratic, or you're waking up more confused or disoriented than usual, it could be a sign that your brain is struggling to keep track of time, which is something dementia can affect. Sleep isn't just about resting. It's when your brain goes into overdrive, cleaning up and organizing memories, making sure everything is stored where it should be. So, when dementia starts to interfere with sleep, it can affect how well your brain functions during the day. If you've noticed a change in your sleep pattern, whether you're waking up in the middle of the night more often or feeling unrest, it might be a good idea to take note and discuss it with a doctor. So far, we've talked about distractions, losing interest in things you used to love, and changes in your sleep patterns. While these things might seem like normal signs of aging, they could also be signals from your brain that something is going on beneath the surface. The thing is, noticing these signs doesn't have to be scary. They're simply reminders that our brains need care and attention, just like the rest of our bodies. If you're noticing any of these changes, take it as a cue to check in with yourself, and if needed, with a healthcare professional, so you can take control of your health and well-being moving forward. Have you experienced any of these signs lately? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. And remember, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tips on maintaining a happy, healthy life as we age. Let's continue this conversation and dive into a few more signs that might be a little trickier to recognize, but are still important to pay attention to. One sign that often gets overlooked, especially in the early stages of dementia, is changes in your sense of direction. Have you ever gone to a place you've been many times, only to find that you're not as sure about where you are or how to get there as you used to be? Maybe at a familiar grocery store or a neighbor's house, but all of a sudden, you can't remember how to get there, or you get confused about the route. This might sound like something that happens when we're distracted or tired, but when this happens repeatedly, it could be more than just forgetfulness. Dementia affects the brain's ability to navigate and remember spatial details. You might find yourself taking a longer route than you usually would, or needing more time to figure out where to go. This could also manifest as getting lost when driving to familiar places. Now, it's important to understand that occasional confusion happens to everyone. It's completely normal. But if you notice that this confusion is happening more often or is lasting longer than it used to, it could be a subtle sign that your brain is having trouble processing and remembering these familiar places and routes. Again, it's not something to panic over immediately, but it's definitely worth noting and bringing up with a healthcare professional if it starts to affect your daily life. Another sign that often flies under the radar is changes in how you handle conversations. Have you noticed that it's becoming harder to follow a conversation, or that you're repeating yourself more than you used to? Maybe you find yourself starting a sentence, losing track of what you were saying, and then not being able to get back to the thought. Or you might realize that you've asked the same question a few times without even realizing it. This can be incredibly frustrating, especially when you're talking to friends or family members and they don't seem to understand why you're struggling. In the early stages of dementia, it's common for people to have difficulty following along in conversations. Words might get lost or sentences might become jumbled. It's not that the person doesn't want to communicate. It's that the brain is struggling to process and organize the thoughts in a coherent way. So, if you or someone you know is finding it harder to keep track of conversations, or if repeating questions has become more frequent, it's something that could point to cognitive changes. Like with the other signs, it's not always a cause for alarm, but it is something to be aware of. Now, let's move on to another sign that can be a little tricky because it's easy to overlook: a change in the way you manage daily tasks. You might notice that something you used to do with ease, like preparing a meal, folding laundry, or even paying bills, feels suddenly overwhelming. You might not be able to organize the steps in your head the way you used to, or it takes much longer to get things done. It can be a small change at first, but it's important to note, the brain relies on a complex system to manage tasks. It's always organizing things in the background so that when you go to cook dinner or fill out a form, you don't have to think too much about it. But when dementia starts to affect the brain, that organization starts to break down. You might forget certain steps in a process or feel more easily frustrated by things that once felt second nature. If you notice yourself struggling with tasks that you could always handle before, it's a sign that your brain may need more time and attention to keep up with its usual functions. Now, I know all of this might sound a little overwhelming, but here's the most important thing to remember. These signs are not set in stone. They don't mean that dementia is inevitable. Our brains are remarkably resilient, and there's so much we can do to support brain health. It's about noticing changes early, taking care of ourselves, and staying proactive. There are so many ways to keep your brain engaged, whether it's through puzzles, learning new skills, or even making small adjustments to your daily routines. But beyond that, it's also about getting the support and guidance you need. If you notice any of these signs creeping up, talking to a doctor can help you get a clearer picture of what's going on. It's always better to catch things early, especially when there's so much that can be done to improve your quality of life. Now, let's look at the final signs that we want to talk about today. These last ones are just as important as the ones we've already covered, and it's crucial to recognize them before they start to interfere too much with your everyday life. One sign to watch for is the loss of smell. It might sound strange, but the ability to smell is actually linked to the brain's function. As dementia begins to affect certain areas of the brain, it can impair the sense of smell. You may notice that food doesn't seem to have the same aroma anymore, or perhaps you can't detect certain scents that used to stand out to you. This can be frustrating, especially when it comes to enjoying meals or even recognizing potential dangers like smoke or gas. It's important to note that a loss of smell can sometimes be a sign of cognitive decline, though it can also be caused by other factors, such as allergies or sinus issues. But if it's happening alongside other signs, it's something to keep an eye on. Another significant change that often catches people by surprise is the way someone might handle emotions. Have you noticed yourself becoming more easily upset or irritable than usual? Maybe something that wouldn't have bothered you in the past, like a minor inconvenience or a small mistake, now send you into a fit of frustration or even anger. Emotional changes like these are often subtle at first, but they can be a sign that dementia is affecting the brain's ability to regulate emotions. As the brain begins to experience changes, it can become hard to control how we react to situations. Sometimes, it may also lead to a more withdrawn or quiet demeanor, where a person starts avoiding social interactions altogether. Now, the thing about these emotional changes is that they often occur when a person is already feeling confused or overwhelmed by other aspects of their lives. When you can't keep track of your thoughts or memories as easily, it can lead to feelings of frustration or sadness, and those emotions can become harder to manage. So, if you notice that you're becoming more easily upset, or if someone you know is suddenly withdrawing from others, it's something to be aware of. Again, it's important not to jump to conclusions, but to keep track of these emotional shifts and have an open conversation about them. Finally, let's talk about one of the most telling signs of all, although it's often the hardest to notice in ourselves. It's the sense that you're not quite yourself anymore. Perhaps you don't feel as sharp or engaged as you once did. Maybe you're finding that your usual routines seem more difficult to maintain, or that your outlook on life is shifting. This sign is a bit harder to define because it's about a gradual change in your overall sense of identity. Sometimes, it's just a feeling that you're no longer in control the way you used to be. And while this might seem like something that could just be a passing phase, if it's accompanied by other signs like forgetfulness, emotional shifts, or difficulty with familiar tasks, it could be the brain telling you that something is changing. The key to all of these signs is recognizing them early and understanding that they don't automatically mean that dementia is your future. In fact, many of these signs can be managed and even improved with lifestyle changes. A little extra attention to your diet, regular exercise, engaging your brain with puzzles and reading, and even making sure to get quality sleep each night can do wonders for your mental clarity. It's all about staying active, both physically and mentally, so that you can continue to enjoy your life and keep moving forward with confidence. Now, I know this information might feel a little heavy, but let me leave you with something important. Just because you notice these signs doesn't mean they have to define you. Our brains are incredibly powerful, and while we can't always stop aging, we can certainly support our brain health in many ways. Acknowledging these signs isn't about fear, it's about empowerment. It's about taking control and making sure you're doing everything you can to stay healthy and happy. Remember, small steps can make a huge difference. And if you're ever unsure, don't hesitate to reach out for support. There's no shame in asking questions and getting the help you need. In fact, the sooner you reach out, the more likely you are to stay ahead of any potential challenges. So, if you've noticed any of these signs, don't ignore them. Talk to a healthcare provider. Start making changes in your lifestyle and keep nurturing your brain. And if you're watching this and feeling like you're still on top of things, that's wonderful. But I encourage you to stay proactive. because the more we care for ourselves now, the better we'll feel tomorrow. I hope this video has given you some valuable insights. And if it resonated with you, please leave a comment below. Let me know if you've noticed any of these signs, or if you have your own tips for staying sharp as we age. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more helpful advice and tips on maintaining your health and well-being. Take care of yourself, and remember, aging doesn't mean slowing down. It means growing with grace and strength. Keep moving forward one step at a time, and stay empowered.